Kevin Nguyen was a 25-year-old from Fort Wayne, Indiana. He was a college student and avid gamer. In the early morning of December 9th, 2018, Kevin got kicked out of a bar after acting strangely and getting into fights with the bouncers, allegedly. Kevin was then seen on video walking in the direction of his house. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Denzel, and this is Unfound. There are many facts about disappearances that I could have never guessed 5 years ago when I started Unfound. That relationships are far and away the number one cause of them. That police seriously have no idea what to do if they can't solve a case in less than a week. That there are truly no in-depth studies of disappearances. And I'm determined to change that, by the way. Of all of those and other points, though, one of the most surprising kinds of disappearances I've learned about is the call but no show. A person calls to be picked up, the ride arrives, but the person isn't there. In fact, the person is never to be seen again. We've covered at least 3 of this exact type. Crystal Morrison, of course, we eventually found out what happened to her. Deborah Bowman, unsolved. Shane Fell, also unsolved. And 2 that you might call hybrids, Chance Engelbert and Rebecca Gary. I bring this up because today we have another of these. Kevin Nguyen called because he needed a ride home from a bar. When his mother arrived, he wasn't there. But this isn't the only reason I'm ironically calling this episode The Telephone Game. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Linez's website, charleyproject.org. A lot of what you need to know about Kevin Nguyen can be found on its Facebook page, which still exists. I would urge you to check it out. Kevin was a fan of the film The Matrix, as am I. He was also a gamer, which I am not. Kevin was a soft-spoken guy with a dark sense of humor. He was close to his family, and in fact was living at home while going to school when he disappeared. Kevin had no vices or diagnosed issues. So, on the night of Saturday, December 8th, 2018, Kevin went to a bar, the Brass Rail, due to him being invited by a local musician. He had been to this place before, though. Witnesses, although to this day it's unclear who they are, say that Kevin behaved strangely not long after arriving. Due to this, he got kicked out of the bar sometime around 1 a.m., December 9th. In fact, he may have even had a fight with the bouncers. Video at a local Arby's showed him walking by it, away from the bar, around 1:30 a.m. However, around 2:30 a.m., Kevin was back at the Brass Rail, calling for a ride. When his mother showed up, Kevin wasn't there. However, just minutes after his mother arrived at the Brass Rail, Kevin was seen again at the same Arby's on video walking away from the bar. He was never seen again. 10 days later, his glasses were found in the parking lot of the Brass Rail. If anyone in the audience has already taken an interest in Kevin's disappearance, you know that many stories have circulated regarding Kevin irritating women at the bar, that Kevin sneaked back into the bar 4 times, that bouncers fought him in the parking lot, etc., etc., etc. Unfound will attempt to make sense of all of it in this episode, and you can help by trying to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, is there a way to rationally connect Kevin walking alone twice on the videos to a foul play possibility? Number 2, could the murder of another Brass Rail patron months before have anything to do with Kevin's disappearance? And number 3, are we really supposed to take the word of a woman who wouldn't give her real name, but who called into a local Fort Wayne show to tell what she saw that night? Kevin's family just wants to find Kevin. However, they do believe the Brass Rail employees and others have not been entirely forthcoming. The guest for this episode is a friend of the family and amateur sleuth, Brett. Unfound News. It's October 1st. You know what that means. Newsletter. Please look for it in your inboxes tonight. If you're not on the list, email me at unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The audio version will be on the website a week from today. Next, I uploaded another Unfound Now episode to the YouTube channel earlier this week. It covers the disappearance of 5-year-old Michael Vaughn from Fruitland, Idaho. I hope you will watch it, and please give the video a thumbs up. Finally, the next few weeks will be busy for me due to my upcoming presentation in Louisiana and then my trip to Colorado to testify in Steve Pankey's trial. So please bear with me, as I will not be as available on social media and elsewhere as usual. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Pandora, Audible, Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show on the Unfound Podcast Channel. Watch, listen, and become a subscriber. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. This week, I need to thank Kim. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I also need to give a huge shout out to all the people who have monetarily contributed using Super Chat during the live show on YouTube on Wednesday nights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for donating. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Yes, you know it. Don't forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com, or you can track down my assistant Heather in the Facebook group. Playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/Unfound Podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound a friend of the Nguyen family, Brett. Brett, welcome to Unfound.
Hello, Ed. Very nice to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And the listeners should know that Brett, I don't know how long it's been, maybe a month or something like that, he had emailed me about working on Kevin's disappearance, and we've had some conversations, and it's good to have him finally on the program. Why don't we start right there, Brett? It's totally up to you how much you want to say about who you are, and we're only using your first name for privacy reasons, but maybe tell the listeners just as a little bit about yourself, as much as you feel comfortable with.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I am originally from the Midwest. Grew up in the south side of Chicago. And I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. That was the second biggest move that I had made during my early years in my 20s. I lived in Champaign, Illinois for a little bit, and kind of during more of the earlier 20s, confused college years, didn't really know what I wanted to do. My parents had moved from Chicago to Fort Wayne the latter part of 93, early 94. My dad was a General Motors retiree, and he was laid off from General Motors at the time from Chicago. So lo and behold, in 93, he was called back to the company after a 6-year layoff, and he picked to move to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And my parents had driven down to Champaign-Urbana, Illinois to basically pick me up and say, hey, we got you a job in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the GM truck assembly plant. And so I moved up there with them. They came down, grabbed all my stuff, and said, let's go. So I moved to Indiana. And I lived in Indiana from 94 to 01. And got into a lot of manufacturing jobs, which led me to my current career, doing machining work. So I guess I'm a little bit of a jack of a few trades. I'm big into music. I've been a DJ since 1997. A lot of Chicago house music was my big thing back then. Played a little bit of guitar back in my early rock days, back in the late 80s. So I was definitely a young guy that reached out for a lot of things. Had a lot of inquisitiveness, I guess you could say, about different social circles, different interests. So I lived in Fort Wayne from 94 to 01, like I said. And the things that we're going to speak about later in the case are places that I've been to. So I know Fort Wayne very well. I didn't really get involved in doing this private investigator type of work until only a couple of years ago. And when I did, it was the Elisa Lam Cecil Hotel case in Los Angeles, in downtown Los Angeles. In 2018, I moved from I moved from Fort Wayne in 01 back to the Chicagoland area, and I had spent from 01 back up to 2018. I moved out to California, Southern California. So I had known about the Elisa Lam case a couple of years, maybe about 2 years after it happened. And in 2013, some of the listeners know I believe it was 2013. It could be 2011, but I think it's 13. Is the year that Elisa Lam went missing. The whole story with being found.
Right.
So I had stumbled across that case online, and I discussed it with a friend, and that kind of put a little bit of the wheels in motion, like, wow, I want to go to LA, and I want to go to that Cecil Hotel, and I want to check that out, and this is so weird. And that was one of the first real things that really piqued my interest with doing any type of investigator work. And I asked my friend, I said, what is she doing in the elevator? She's acting strange, and why is she stepping out and making hand motions and all that? And we went on talking about that for a while. And so this conversation occurred around 2016. So from 2016 to the actual time that I moved out to California was about 2 years. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to move to Southern California. I wanted to go to LA. I wanted to just get exposed with the West Coast flavor of life. I had already, done everything that I could in Chicago. I just wanted something different. So the first year that I was here, I stumbled across Brain Scratch, and I'm sure most of the listeners know about Brain Scratch.
My friend John's show, sure.
Yeah, his first several shows was on the Elisa Lam case, and he dissected everything that he could. He talked about, he went there with a friend, and they went in the hotel, they went in the elevator, they did this, they did that, and it was his insight, he was pulling me in, basically. And it just snowballed from there. Then I was watching more of his episodes. Then it went to Trace Evidence, and Stephen Pacheco runs that. He does amazing work. I would be at work cutting steel, making parts at work, and I would have my earbuds in, because it's loud at work, cutting steel. So I either you wear earplugs or you kind of don't let the boss know. You put the earbuds in, and you turn up Trace Evidence, and those are about an hour and a half. So I kind of broadened my horizons with going to that one, and then there was several others that I had gotten into, and so one of my biggest hobbies nowadays is Saturday afternoon, making a pot of coffee, doing an hour and a half of housework, and then just watching episode after episode of even Unfound. I've become a big fan of Unfound now lately.
Let me jump in here for a second, Brett. Would you say that true crime, when I talk to my listeners, they know that I'm 51 and I kind of got my start being interested in disappearances and mysteries back in the 1970s in search of the same way, or is this something that maybe came to you a little later in life?
Well, I'm not too far behind you on age, about 2 years. So I'll be 50 this coming April.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember the John Walsh story when it was on NBC back in the 1980,
sure,
81 or whatever year he went missing. Unsolved Mysteries. I remember watching an episode of that, and I went and told my mom, I'm like, I saw that girl at school, and so I called into the Unsolved Mysteries show, and I said, I saw her, she's in my class, of course, obviously I didn't solve a mystery, but still, it was, it's always, a person going missing, it's not like losing a shoe or losing, a pencil, it's a human being. It's taking something of such a large mass, and it just disappears. And there's so many different working parts involved, things that we'll never know, things that we do know, and how does that all fit together? And it's just I've always been introverted and a deep thinker. I'm not big on small talk. When somebody's telling me something that's interesting, or there's content, where there's some stuff, some fat to chew on, when I can really dig into it, that's what really gets me interested. Is when somebody tells a really good story, and I can take bits and pieces and run with it and try to come up with ideas on my own. I really, really enjoy doing that. I really enjoy picking things apart, even breaking things down and putting them back together again, whether it's mechanical, or just something in a conversation. So, yeah.
Would you say that regarding Kevin's case, which is of course what we're talking about this evening, would you say it's you became interested in it because you lived in Fort Wayne at the time? Is that what drew you to his disappearance?
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying earlier, I once I had really found the outlets on YouTube, the many different channels. It was come home from work, do the dishes at the sink, and turn on the latest episode of Brain Scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And his episodes are anywhere from 25 to 50 minutes. So I've got 25 minutes of dishes to do, and I'm thinking about every little thing that he's saying in that show, and it was not really by mistake, but it was I guess it was by fate that he covered Kevin Nguyen's case.
Mm-hmm.
And when the second that he said Fort Wayne, Indiana, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I know that area. I grew up there. All right, this is interesting. Okay, now, I wasn't really excited, like, oh, this is great. But I mean, it's like, I was excited, but it's a person that went missing. So it's not like I'm excited that the person is missing. It's more like, wow, I really want to hear about this case. This case is, it just, the dog ears propped up. That's kind of how I was, and so I had to go over that particular episode like 3 times in like 2 days. Just pick apart things like, they mentioned the area, the places that Kevin Nguyen had gone to. It's like, wow, I know all these places. So yeah, the next logical step was going to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Facebook page is created by that time, and that's where my direction went to right after the John Lorton episode on him.
So Kevin disappeared in, of course, December of 2018. When would you say that? And I have to admit off the top of my head that I don't know when John covered Kevin's disappearance. But when did you first get involved, and what was it like contacting his family that first time? Were they open to you, or did they think you were just, some weirdo? Or explain all that.
Yeah. Well, I went back on the Facebook page and I looked at some of my earliest comments. The earliest comment that I found that I had made was in June of 2019. And I remember the comment that I had made on the post, and it was more of just a blind inquiry type of thing. Asking, kind of theorizing a little bit. So I'm going to say that probably around the early part of June 2019 is
Okay.
when I had just discovered that case.
Okay. And how did it go? Contacting his family. I know you've had many conversations with him over the last 2+ years. How did that first conversation go? Because as you know, a lot of families that are on Unfound, they have a lot of people reaching out to them. A lot of these people are what I might call kooks. They're just trying to get inside information. They're really not trying to be helpful. How would you say that Kevin's family reacted to you?
Yeah, well, I remember, one of the first things that I said to them, and this is coming from somebody that that was 25 at a time and was going to bars. And, I just threw it out there. I'm like, oh, well, maybe he went to go do a drug deal across the street, never came back, but when I started talking to them, when I not directly to the family, but to the whole, the whole group, the whole, everyone that was interacting on the page, I would write out, 3 paragraphs of just, ideas, and I would try to be as clear and concise with my thoughts as possible. And that's usually how I write things out. I'm not a quick 2-sentence guy. Usually when I post a comment, it's usually something that's very well thought out. I put every thought into that comment. And back in my, the first year and a half, I was really kind of wild with my ideas. Like, I would take a little piece of something that I would hear from a podcast, and then I would run with it, and I would start to invent this story, and a couple times I had contacted a couple family members. I'm like, wow, I got this idea here, and let me run it past you and see what you think, and it was this big elaborate story, and I'm like, what do you guys think, does it sound like maybe that, and they would say, no, that doesn't sound like my, my whoever, but that was me really trying, trying to put as many brain cells together to figure out what possibly could happen. I've never been the type of guy that would frivolously go into a missing persons case and say, oh, I just want to do this for myself. No, I do this because I genuinely care about these people. I care about what they're going through. And when I had first contacted the family, yes, there was a few comments where I ran wild with things, and I said, well, what do you think about this? And of course they said, no, that's not right. But the thing is that I stayed dedicated. And from the comments, it went to me messaging one of the family members. I think it was Kevin's grandmother. And, I had really expressed interest in trying to help them. And the biggest thing that really went over well for them was that I know the territory. I mentioned many times places that I had gone to, places that they know about, places that we spent, time at back in, the mid to late 90s, just common places that you would go to. I would mention landmarks, and they would know.
Mm-hmm.
So my credibility was already there, so I had that working for me. So I think that really helped out. That, and also being able to say that, yeah, I was kind of a party guy back then when I was 25.
So how long would you say that you have been corresponding with them then?
So if we were to say the initial contact started in June, within about 2 months, we had already, I'd say probably by August, if not early September, we started our own Facebook Messenger group, and it's just a very small group of the 4 of us, and it's myself, Kevin's father, Kevin's grandmother, and a good family friend, and that's all we do. Is we talk about the case. We talk about things that we find out, different places, landmarks, people that are, may have been at the brass rail the night of his disappearance, people that we definitely know were there. And we're very good at dissecting every little piece of information that we can find. That's basically,
Okay.
what we've been doing for the past couple of years.
All right. So let's just say then, of course, we're doing this interview on September 16th, 2021. So a little maybe over 2 years. You've been talking to them, talking about Kevin's disappearance, doing your own work for them, of course, for free privately in your spare time. And that is how, you earned their trust, even though you've never met them in person, anything like that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I just wanted to establish all of that so people understand how you got involved, how you know the family. And maybe I should ask you this. How many different people have you spoken to in Kevin's family about his disappearance?
Only the people that's in our group. So only Kevin's father and grandmother.
Okay, very good. Okay, so in those 2 years, let's move on to this. What have you learned? Of course, you did not know Kevin personally. I did not know Kevin personally. But what do you think that you've learned about Kevin? What has his family told you about him? His personality, his hobbies. What was he doing for work at the time? Those things. What can you tell the audience of what you've learned about Kevin?
Well, like I've mentioned earlier, the group, the messenger group that we've all been involved in, we've discussed many times Kevin's personality, his interests, people that he had known throughout the course of his life, and he's from what they have mentioned, he's kind of an introverted guy, kind of like me, quiet, definitely not a troublemaker. He's not the kind of guy that goes into a public place and creates a commotion or wants attention drawn to him. Just a quiet guy. He loves to draw. He loves. He's big into art. Big into anime. If I were to meet Kevin, I don't see having a problem being friends with him at all. I like introverted people. I've trained introverted people at work. I've had introverted friends. I just there's something about quiet people and how they correspond with each other. It's just I know I wouldn't have a problem being friends with him. I think he seems like he'd be a real nice guy to be friends with.
Okay, and what was he doing? What was his job at the time of his disappearance?
I believe he was a full-time student.
He was.
The family has never mentioned that he, at the time of his disappearance, that he was working. So I believe he was a full-time student. He had some pretty big plans on going to a university. I believe he was going to a local college in Fort Wayne. So he had some plans. He wanted to expand on the things that he was doing with his artwork. He had a passion for doing that, and I've seen some of the work that he's done. Some of it's on his Facebook page. There was somebody else that did a small 45-minute YouTube video on Kevin. She met us. I think it was via Facebook and Messenger, but it wasn't in our group. She was somebody that probably kind of like me found the John Lorne episode, felt bad for the family, and so she was a young YouTuber podcaster back in 2019. And so on her video, her 25-minute video of Kevin, she showcased some of his artwork, and it's really, really amazing. I mean, you could tell he really puts a lot of time into it, a lot of really fine detail. I mean, I don't know the differences in styles of art, drawing and painting and stuff, but yeah, I was definitely impressed with it from what I've seen from that.
All right, so he was a full-time student, and he was living at home at the time in Fort Wayne?
Yes, he was living with his parents in their home.
Okay. So introverted, very artistic, going to school, still living at home, which given his age, maybe that is not too crazy to, understand. Have a girlfriend, any relationships that you've talked about with him? Did anything like that with his family?
No, not that. There was no mention of him having a girlfriend at the time of his disappearance. As far as relationships, no, nothing that was an actual relationship. I think maybe he had taken an interest in women, maybe at school, or when he had gone out to different social gatherings, bars or whatever. I think he, through the course of just being out and about, had probably ran into a few of the same women at these places, and so I think he eventually had taken an interest in a few that he had seen out at this different places, the same people. So
okay,
yeah, but nothing that was that he had established.
Okay.
In concrete. So.
Let me just ask you some questions. Once again, these are things I just have to ask because, as you know, you listen to the program, this is what I do. Any conversation in the last 2 years when talking about Kevin with his family, any things about any addictions, mental health issues, beefs, arguments, problems with anybody at the time of his disappearance, before the night of him going to the brass rail? Anything like that in any of those conversations?
Nothing that I know of in terms of addictions, I guess. The only information that I know that would be anywhere near closely related to what you're asking, was a couple weeks prior to his night of that he had vanished. Was at another local bar a couple miles away from the brass rail, and he had a little bit too much to drink that night, and he called his father for a ride, and he left his car at the bar, and then I guess they went and picked it up the next day. So it's about it really that I know about.
All right, so he's very conscientious. He didn't want to drink and drive.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I then to understand that he had his own car, or that night was he driving his parents' car, or do you know?
I can't say for sure, but I believe he does have his own car. If not, I'm sure he's
okay. Because that will play a role here a little bit later. The brass rail, just in general, from what you know, what his family has stated, once again, in your 2 years of talking to them. Had he been there before? How many times? 2 times, 10 times, 20 times? To your knowledge, had he, before that night, had he ever had any problems there?
So it's been noted in our group that he had been there probably at least, I'd say around half a dozen times.
Okay.
Plus or minus, 1 or 2 or so. So, a good handful of times.
right.
And if I could add to this,
Please.
Kevin's grandmother, did mention that in a conversation that we had in our group, that one of the bouncers working at the brass rail said, "Yeah, I remember Kevin. He was a real nice, quiet guy. Never, would come in, sit by himself, and have his drink and just not bother anybody. Just he kind of did his. He was there, but he was kind of doing his own thing, and he was just, never a troublemaker. So they never really had a problem with him being there."
Okay. So this was not, what we're saying is this is not his first time there. And in fact, people who worked there, whether it's a bartender, bouncers, or whoever, kind of knew him. Maybe didn't know him personally, but they had seen him there before.
Yes, he was starting to become a little bit of a familiar face from what we've talked about in our group. As far as close friends with any of the people that were there, I don't really know. We've never really gone over specific details regarding any type of anything else outside of just acquaintances or, I think, there was people, it's been mentioned that there's people that were in some of his classes that have gone out to these places, these bars that Kevin was going to at the time.
Okay. Now, you've just mentioned that a few weeks before that he was in another place. Maybe he had too much to drink, decided to get a ride home, which of course is the conscientious thing to do. Left his car there, came back the next day. But as everybody will hear, on this particular night, he did not drive to the brass rail. But as far as you know, just in general, did he walk a lot? No car, public transportation, Uber, Lyft? What was his normal mode of transportation? Of course, going to school. What is your understanding regarding all of that?
As far as transportation and stuff, a lot of it was, see, his residence is within a pretty close proximity of where he was going to school, I believe, if I remember correctly. I think there's an IU chapter, or whatever you want to call it, like an IU Indiana University campus. So there's several IUs in the state of Indiana, and there's one in Fort Wayne, and I believe it's within a few miles of Kevin's home. So I think a lot of it was very convenient for him. I think as far as taking public transportation, that was never mentioned, so I can't really comment on that.
Okay. But as far as his house, once again, your understanding, his house, where he was living with his family, and the brass rail, they're not like right next to each other. This a few miles to walk.
Yes, from his parents' home to the brass rail, I believe is just over a 4-mile walk, between 4.2 to 4.5 miles.
Okay. All right, so we've established some things about Kevin. Once again, understanding that Brett did not know him personally, but he's gotten to know the family. He knows what they've said about Kevin and what was going on in his life at the time. I myself have read quite a bit about Kevin and what was going on at the time, and it all seems congruent to me. So let's move up to December 8th, 2018. What do you know about Kevin's movements that day? May start earlier in the day. Was he at home? Was he at school? It was a Saturday, maybe not at school. But what do you know what he did that day? Is it possibly important to him going to the brass rail that night? What do you know about that earlier in the day?
I don't really know anything about what happened earlier in the day. In our group, the only things that we really talked about was that one of the people that was going to be at the brass rail that night had wanted him to go. I don't know if it was either an invite or whatever. But there was the night that he went missing. The entertainment of the night was an out of town comedian and I think 3 bands that were playing, and the type of music, it was kind of like punk music, heavy rock music, and Kevin is was involved in listening to a lot of that type of music. So I think it was a lot of it was the music that brought him out, and then it was probably a familiar face, and it was from what we've spoken about in our group, it was a young lady that had invited him to come out that night. So, and from what we've talked about, there was no romantic relationship. It was just these two had known each other. And I don't really know the earliest connection that they had with each other. I just know that on the night in question, she had, I'm assuming through Facebook, contacted him, or he saw the flyer and said, "Oh, I want to go." And so she was kind of, she kind of helped to get him to go that night. And that's about as far as I can really speculate on that.
Okay. So he gets there. Did they meet up? Were there other friends of Kevin there when he gets to Brass Rail that evening?
He was given a ride at about 10 o'clock, between 10 and 10:30. His sister, Leanne, drove him to the Brass Rail. And that is kind of an unknown thing. We don't, at the time that he had arrived, we don't really know who was there. So the bars close in Fort Wayne at 3 a.m. Their last calls at 2:30. So it is to go to a bar at 10:30. That's usually kind of like just before peak time. Usually around 12, 1 a.m. is usually when things are kind of revved up at the the peak moment of the night. So he was getting there a little early. Was he getting there because he knew some people that were going to be there at the time he was going to be there, or was he just in a festive mood and wanted to start early? That I don't know. We've never been able to figure out if there was somebody there that he knew the moment that he walked in, or 30 minutes after he had arrived.
Okay, so, I guess what I'm asking, Brett, is being that you said that he got invited to go there, that would imply that somebody was going to meet him there. Is that true?
Yes. The person that had invited him, the young lady that had invited him, was indeed there.
Okay.
And I guess the story goes is that Kevin had become intoxicated at quite a rapid pace that night. And Kevin has been known to, from his dad, has said Kevin's not a big drinker. He likes to drink, beer, and he usually only has, maybe 1 or 2 beers, and then he's done.
Okay.
So it was odd when a lot of this had came out about how he acted that night. The parents were very confused because they said that my son is not like this. If we have a party at home, he's going to be sitting off in the corner drinking a beer or two, and he's going to do his own thing. And then if he gets up, if he gets bored or whatever, he's going to go to his room or whatever he wants to do. But he's not the kind of guy that sits there and just slams beers or drinks liquor. So so yeah.
Okay, so he gets there. This girl, do they meet up? Have you or his family ever spoken to this girl? And do you know who she is? Was this somebody that he was going to school with? Who is this young woman who invited him? Do not use her name, but what is her connection to Kevin?
She is a local musician. She goes around the surrounding towns outside of Fort Wayne and is a performer. Outside patios, bars, and so I guess Kevin was, into her music, and so he, he went there that night, knowing that she was going to be there.
Okay.
She had invited him, so yeah.
Okay. Once again though, is this like a personal friend of his, or do you get the idea that being that she's a performer, musician, she was just inviting a bunch of different people to the brass rail that night?
Well, I think that's, coming from my background in in that line of work. That's what we do. It's like when we add friends on Facebook and we look on their profile and we see that they're into the same type of interests. Of course, we're going to invite them. It's not that there's some sort of secret interest. It's just, hey, you like this band and I like this band, and guess what? They're playing Friday night. So
was she performing that night?
No.
Okay. All right. No. All right. So she knows Kevin. She invites him to the brass rail, and he gets there. Are we even clear on if he and her hung out at all, or anything like that? Did they sit together? Did they stand together? Did they dance together? Being that she's the one that invited him there, do we know anything about those two just their interaction that night?
The only information that's really ever been released that we found out is Kevin became intoxicated within a very quick amount of time. We're talking. He was told at 1 a.m. that he needed to leave, and they basically wanted him to pay his bar tab around 1 a.m. Between 10:30 to 1 a.m., 12:30, we're talking roughly 2.5 hours. Can you get drunk off of beer in 2.5 hours? I guess if you slam 8 of them in 2.5 hours, but to speculate on what he had partaken that night.
We're not going to speculate on this. All I'm asking you is that what did she say? If anybody's talked to her, what does she say? She has said that he was intoxicated, that he was acting unlike himself. Has she said that?
There was several people that had said that he 1 minute he was fine, and the next minute he just completely changed. And he was said. It was said that he was making kind of rude passes at women, making them feel uncomfortable. And the people there that had seen him at other times that he had went there, they said, "Wow, what is that guy doing? Well, he doesn't act like this. He's never acted like this at any of the other times that he's been here." So yeah, it was a lot of people were taken off guard by that.
All right, this is what you found out later. Is this the reason that they wanted him to leave at 1 a.m.?
Yeah, so the story goes he was kicked out of the brass rail 4 times that night.
4 times?
Yeah, I don't know how they came up with that number.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that seems like 1 would be enough. I mean, I guess the question is, if he got kicked out the first time, how did he get in the next 3 times?
Yeah,
nobody knows that, right?
Well, there is the owner of the bar does have cameras all over the place. He's got cameras inside the building. He's got cameras outside the building. His home is within a very close proximity, actual eyesight of the bar, and he's got cameras on his house pointing towards the bar, so he knows everything about what's going on in that bar.
I guess what I'm saying, Brett, is, I mean, who was keeping track of these things? 4 times, 3 times, 5 times, 6 times. I'm just wondering if people were kicking him out of the bar, how he was sneaking back in. No idea regarding that.
Well, they have a door guy / bouncer. So, and see, that's one of the biggest mysteries of this night. The surveillance footage was never released.
No, we're not. I don't want to get into that right now, Brett. I'm just asking you a simple question. Who is this? Just a real thing of 4 times? Once again, do you have any idea how he could have gotten back into the bar 3 times? Has that ever been explained to you?
No. It's just that was thrown out there, and I don't know exactly what the reason for that was. But
okay, we'll just keep it. Yeah. We're just keeping it nice and simple here. We'll get into the videos and things later. All right, so something's going on with him, allegedly, for the people who were there. You and I were not there, but that's what they said. And it was bad enough that he gets kicked out at 1 a.m. And then there's this story about him getting kicked out actually a total of 4 times, which we're not sure if that's an exaggeration. I don't know who would be counting the times and how he would get back in. Some reason that doesn't make any sense to me. But, it sounds to me like just an exaggeration. But I can understand, though, if he was not behaving in a mature way, then they would certainly have reason to kick him out, whether for whatever reason, whether he was drunk or not. But is this the time, after this first time, once again, this 1 a.m. time, that we can then talk about this video, the first video of Kevin being on camera at an Arby's, the restaurant nearby? Is it believed that it was after this first time that he got kicked out that he was seen at the Arby's? Is that what is believed?
Yeah, so kind of the timeline with that is I've actually seen the receipt, and the timestamp on the receipt was right around, I think it was like 12:57 a.m. His total on his bar tab was really was a very low amount. I think it was less than $30, and he left a $1 tip. There was a food truck outside, and a truck that just sells pizza. And he went outside and got a piece of pizza off the pizza truck. And so this is between 1 and 1:30. Right around 1:30 is when he's seen walking past an Arby's, which is very, very close to the brass rail. It's about just over a block away. Mm-hmm. And he has to cross Washington Boulevard. I believe it's Washington. And so, we're talking about maybe like a 6-minute walk from the brass rail to the Arby's. So.
Okay. And being that if you've seen this video, is Kevin by himself?
Yes. Yeah. The video, in that particular video.
Yeah.
Those sidewalks where they put a little hump on the sidewalk, and for certain public places, I can't recall the reason for why they do that. Mm-hmm. But the front sidewalk of this Arby's, it has an intentional hump that was cemented in. And Kevin, as he walks up onto that sidewalk, he slightly trips over that. So that is kind of an inclination that he probably didn't see it. Was he intoxicated, or was just not able to see it? So, and this is at the 1:30 a.m. Surveillance footage.
Okay. And is he by himself?
Yes, he is.
All right. And what direction is he going in that video? Is he going away from the brass rail, or would you say that he's going toward the brass rail? Your understanding?
He's going away from the brass rail, in the opposite direction of it.
Okay. But even though he's walking away, it is then known, not just believed, but known, being that we just talked about him maybe getting kicked out of the brass rail more than once, is that even though in that video he is seen walking away from the brass rail, whether he's stumbling or not, somehow he worked his way back to the brass rail. That's what's known, correct?
Yes. This is in December, and for all the listeners out there that live in the Midwest, December and January, especially in January, some of the coldest months of the year, and we're talking, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. That's the coldest parts of the night. So so we're talking 17-degree weather. He was not dressed appropriately. He chose to not wear a jacket that night. He chose to just wear a hoodie. He was just basically dressed very casually, and that's how he chose to go.
All right, but I'm asking you, it is though understood then, though, even though he was walking away from the video, away from the brass rail on the Arby's video, that somehow he ends up back at the brass rail.
Yes, yeah, he does.
Okay, and what is your understanding? Once again, we realize I wasn't there, you weren't there, his family wasn't there. But what is your understanding about what happens when he goes back to the brass rail? I guess to get there for the second time.
We don't know exactly what time he arrives back at the brass rail. We know that it's last call is at 2:30, and the next thing that we know that happened was he got back into the brass rail, and he was hiding out in the woman's bathroom. And somebody went into the woman's bathroom and said, that guy is back here again. He needs to be escorted out again.
Wow.
And so the bouncer went in and pulled him out, and I guess Kevin's the type of guy, from what the family has told, he doesn't put up with, he doesn't like people putting their hands on him. He's into the mixed martial arts. He's got quite a big interest in that. He has a friend of 10 years that had been involved in that also, and I guess their friendship kind of was bonded by their mutual interest in MMA. So the story goes is that he was taken down by the bouncer inside the bar, and then he was immediately taken out to the back area, the smoking area, where he was roughed up by several people. Actually, he was taken from the smoking area out to the back parking lot, and was wedged between a couple of vehicles, and his glasses was knocked off of his face.
Who were the witnesses to this? Do you know?
Well, one of the biggest sources that we had for this information, besides what I had found in our group with the family, there was a guy that did a podcast shortly after this happened, and a lot of this stuff came out about the events that had happened that night. And so there was a young lady that had called in and spoken to the guy that did the podcast, and she filled in some of the blanks with one of the things that she had said. She was there that night. Miss X is her name. And he said that Kevin did a running charge towards the bouncer, and I guess that started another fight, physical altercation with those two. It was also said in the podcast that There was several people that had tried to get Kevin to go into an Uber that was called, and he just wouldn't do it. And they said, why is this guy acting like this? He's, acting like a child, why, from how it was explained is that Kevin was acting, just really intense. One of the guys, the comedian, that's how he put it. Cause I actually contacted him, Facebook Messenger, and I said, all right, you were there that night. Can you help us out with anything? And he said, one of the only things he said is that Kevin was very intense. Now, I don't know what that means, but that's what he said.
Okay, is the comedian saying that he was out in this parking lot when this fight was going on, or is he just talking about what went on inside the bar?
He's just talking about what happened inside, or what he witnessed inside the bar.
All right, so as far as, I guess what I'm saying, as far as anything that went on outside, are you saying that we only have one person's word on that, and this is this woman who wouldn't even use her real name to call into another program?
Yes, yeah. Okay. As far as we know.
All right. All right, so we only have one person's source on this, and this person didn't even want to use her real name?
Yes.
Okay. Any idea, has the family herself, any idea who this woman might be?
We have our suspicions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to use any names, but of course you have to understand that there always has to be a high degree of skepticism when you have somebody calling in, he is not using their real name, and they're saying they saw something, and then just one person's word, everybody then just takes it as the truth. This person is just saying something. We don't know if that person was ever there. We don't know if this person has a beef with the brass rail or the owner or any of the bouncers or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not saying she's lying. All I'm saying is we just have one person's word regarding all of this.
The physical stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the physical stuff. One witness, so we just have to remember that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. All I'm saying is the listeners have to understand what the source is for all of this. I think that's the most important part. Okay, sure. But at some point, whether that happened or not, whether he got beat up or not, or whatever happened, whether he charged anybody or not, there is another second video that happens later. So we have the first video of what we've already talked about. What about the second video? What is your understanding regarding it? What is the time frame? What does it show on that video?
Well, I could give you a little bit of knowledge on what happened a few minutes before that video was captured, I guess, or whatever you want to say.
Okay.
There was a young lady that was there at the brass rail, and she saw Kevin outside, and she went up to him and she said, "Do you need a ride?" And he said, "No, I'm okay." But he appeared to be very out of it, so like he was drunk or something. So she basically just left him alone, and then she saw him walk away, and that's the last that she'd seen of him. So, and that would lead up to the either the 1:30 footage at Arby's or the 2:44 a.m. Footage at the Arby's.
All right, well, let's talk. So she's not sure if she saw him before the first time or the second time, but there is a second video, 2:45, showing him on that same, just so we're clear, at the same Arby's on the same camera.
Yeah, I mean, she knows the time, but I don't know the time that she talked to Kevin. But there was a second time, and it was between the minutes of like 2:38 to 2:44, where Kevin had approached the surveillance camera on the right side of the Arby's and then walked past. His composure in the second video was much better. It appears that he is holding something in his hand. It's like he pulls something out of his pocket, He flips it open, and then he closes it, and he walks out of the view of the camera.
Okay. And is he by himself?
Yes.
Okay. And is he going, once again, is he walking away from the brass rail?
Yes.
Okay. Now we should put in here at some point, between the first video and the second video, in that time frame, if we are to believe he did go back to the brass rail, whether that thing out in the back happened or not, at some point he called somebody. Who did he call?
He called his sister Leanne. I believe it was right. I don't want to speculate. So it was shortly before the 244 video at the Arby's. So it's about a 15-minute drive from the home to the brass rail, because you're driving through downtown Fort Wayne from the other side of Fort Wayne. So, so he called his sister Leanne, and his sister answered the phone, and he's now we don't exactly know if it was a text message or if it was a phone conversation, but he made contact with his sister between the time of 2 and 2:30, kind of leaning more towards 2:30 based on the timeline. Says, "I need a ride," and she and her mother and his mother, Kevin's mother, the sister and his mother has a conversation. The mother says, "You stay here. I'm going to go and pick him up." And so she arrives at the bar, within that.
Okay. I have to ask you something. You've been coordinating, I'm not saying it's your fault, but you've been coordinating with his family, talking to members in his family. Why is it unclear 2 years later whether that was a phone call or a text? That does seem like something that would certainly be understood at this time.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that also. Just speaking with the family, there's been several times where we've talked about things, and I'm like, wow, I should have asked that question. They don't know me. They just know that I'm a guy that reaches out to them at 2 a.m. when I have an idea in my head that just like, hey, I just thought of this, or at 4 p.m. like, hey, how's it going? I tried contacting this person, that does a podcast, or this, YouTuber, or theorizing, on stuff. So I don't, it's completely up to them on what they want to tell me, know, and I'm completely fine with that. I'm there to help them. I'm not there to press them for questions if they don't want to give it to me. So
Sure.
I'm not saying that they don't know. I think it's just some of these might be details that either were forgotten or they just weren't important enough to remember at that time.
Okay, so I guess why I'm asking that is it would certainly be interesting if it was a phone call to hear this, to know what the sister had to say about Kevin's demeanor, how he was talking, was he slurring his words, how did he sound? Did he sound stressed? Did he sound out of it? In contrast to just words on a text. That's why I'm bringing that up. So I think that would probably be helpful in us understanding Kevin's demeanor, that night, from his sister. Once again, if it was a phone call, if a text, then I don't know how helpful that's going to be. So
we did, and this has been a conversation that we've had over the past 2 weeks. And I remember the first year that I was involved in this, we had really tried to get the phone records. And I even called the phone company out there and I said, what does it take to get a phone record? And it seemed impossible. Well, we had a phone conversation, or we had a messenger conversation a couple weeks ago, and voila, Kevin's grandmother posts, his phone record for that night, or that month or whatever, and it was just that little area that day, I think, or that week. The phone calls or any outgoing calls or whatever, and there was only a few, and I think it was 2:20, might have been like 2:28, 2:27 a.m. that morning on the.
Okay. I guess once again, I realize that, this is, of course, this is what I do. It would certainly be good to know if somebody could talk to the sister and say, yeah, he called me, or yeah, he just texted me. I would probably put that on your list of things to do, probably to ask the family the next time you can talk to them. And if you find that out before this interview airs, I will certainly be glad to pass that along to the listeners. Okay, I think that's an important piece of information. Okay, so his mother goes to pick him up, but it seems that, of course, we know that he, of course, did not get picked up. In fact, instead, he's seen on this video at Arby's the second time. What does the mother do when she gets to the brass rail? Does she get out of the car? When she can't find Kevin, does she go inside? How long does she wait for him? Does she try calling him? What is your understanding when his mother went to pick him up, and of course he wasn't there?
One of the biggest things about this disappearance is the irony of the timeline. Kevin was seen at 2:44 at the Arby's, and when Kevin's mother had shown up, it was at the brass rail. It was after 2:30. She goes to the front door. She asks somebody working at the brass rail, have you seen, is my son here? And I guess she described him, and the person that was there said, yeah, he was here, but he was kicked out, and he was kicked out 4 times.
Huh. Okay.
And so she went back out to her car, I'm assuming, and she started to call him repeatedly. She had called him 20 times sitting in her car, and he would not answer the phone. Wow. So between the minutes of 2:30 to 2:44, she's outside of the bar by the front door, in the spot where the pizza truck was, but the pizza truck left, and she took the spot. Is from, I think, what we've talked about in the group. Okay. So she had a very close spot to the front door where she could see, if he walked out. So it's we're thinking that when she was pulling up to the brass rail, he was outside in the back getting roughed up by the bouncer. So it was just really weird that this all happened at the same time. And then he took off towards the Arby's.
Okay. And so she's trying to call him, and of course he doesn't pick up.
Yeah. It's okay. We don't know what happened to the phone. We have no idea.
All right. So once again, he didn't pick up. It may be that he didn't have his phone. Maybe his phone got damaged, or maybe it's possible he was just ignoring her, or the phone was dead. There's a lot of different possibilities, but she's calling him 20 times, 50 times, and he doesn't pick up.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know how long she sat there at the brass rail? When did she eventually, drive home? Did she maybe think of riding around, trying to find out, is he walking home? Do you know what she chose to do after this?
I know that Kevin's father wasn't in town at the time of this incident. So as far as her driving around, I don't really know. This is stuff that we haven't really gone over.
Okay.
So I can't really say anything on that.
Okay. So we don't know. She very well may have. I mean, I think that's what a lot of anybody would do, not just a parent, but a sibling, anybody. But of course, we know that for some reason, Kevin didn't make it home, even though there is proof that he was walking past this Arby's right down the street from the brass rail while his mother's waiting at the brass rail, and he's going the opposite direction by himself. That doesn't mean that somebody couldn't have been following him, or somebody was waiting for him, or he was going to meet somebody. All we know is he was going away from the brass rail by himself at roughly 2:40 in the morning.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So, of course, mother shows up. He's not there. Not sure what she did after that time, but what did the family do? Your understanding. Of course, they tried calling him. How quickly did, for example, they get the police involved in this?
Well, this made it onto the local news quite quickly.
All right, let's talk about that. Yeah, tell the listeners about it.
Within a matter of days, I think there's 3 major networks in Fort Wayne. ABC, NBC, CBS, and if I remember correctly, I think all of them were covering the case, and Kevin's father, grandmother, and a couple friends of the family, they were up within a matter of a couple of days, or if not within a few days, canvassing the area, the path of travel away from the brass rail, heading past the Arby's, that whole area. They canvassed that area. They went door to door, actually, I don't want to say that they went door to door, but they went around that area and they scoured every piece of land that they could find, I guess, garbage dumpsters, just looking for any type of clue.
Right.
They put up posters or banners and stuff on the street on Broadway Avenue, which is where the brass rail is, and the surrounding areas. They put up a lot of banners.
Okay. If this might not have come up in your conversations, but I have to ask, these Arby's videos, who found those? Was it the police who just going down the street, or was that something the family did, that those Arby's videos were discovered? Or maybe it was the Arby's manager found out that Kevin was missing and decided to check his or her videos on their own. Do you know how those videos were discovered?
The family was really the one that had found this, and they these places. There's several businesses in that area, and Arby's was the only one that actually had footage that they could find. So they got lucky with that, and I think it was it was also probably the news that helped.
Okay. All right, so that video is found. Being that they were canvassing out there, it sounds like that would have been found very quickly. These two clips of, I guess, roughly an hour apart, a little more than an hour apart, of Kevin walking by this restaurant. Do you even know, of course we could go check the hours, do you even know if Arby's is even open at that time? We have McDonald's here in Clearwater that are open 24 hours. Do we even know if that Arby's was open at that time or not?
No.
It was not. Okay. All right, so they got involved. The family got involved very quickly. The police get involved very quickly. The media got involved very quickly. Who went? Did the police go to the brass rail? Obviously, we have stories about what went on that night. Obviously, people who were there that night, I don't know if their stories are true or not, have been talking. Who was spoken to, if you know, at the brass rail? And in particular, maybe this young woman who invited him there. Did the police track her down? What did all these people have to say?
As far as I know, the attendees of that night at the brass rail have not been questioned. The police did go to the brass rail, and I don't know exactly how soon. It could have been the next night or whatever, but they did go to the brass rail. They did speak with the owner of the brass rail, and the owner showed the video footage of that night to the police, but the owner has not allowed the family to see the footage. So to this day, they have not seen any footage of inside the brass rail that night.
Okay, so there is video that at least existed at the time of his disappearance, And the understanding is that the owner did show that to the police. We're not sure what's on that video. I don't know if we'll ever know what's on that video. And surely the brass rail owner has no responsibility showing it to the public, and the police really don't either, even though it would be nice for all of us to see it. But what I would say is that if the owner did show the video, he must feel that nothing was done inside the bar that was illegal, or something like that that hurt Kevin. Although there might have been something that went on outside. And we do have to remember that there is this woman who called in, Ms. X, and saying what she saw. But once again, it'll be up for the listeners to decide if she's telling the truth or not. And of course, we at Unfound, after 225 disappearances, we know how people who don't know anything like to infuse themselves into these disappearances and act like they were there and they're experts. So there's that. Let's move on to this. Phone records. You stated that the phone records have not been gotten, but do we know anything about any ping information? We do know that Kevin was walking away from the brass rail at 2:40 something in the morning. Do the pings show that? Do you know anything about that?
The only information that we know about Kevin's phone after the disappearance was that I think about 3 days later, there was a ping on Kevin's phone, and it was within close proximity of the brass rail, and the phone has not pinged since.
Okay, and so Kevin is missing. I guess the clothes that he was wearing that night, and you've already stated these are not clothes that would have been conducive to the elements that night. It went down, I think, into the teens in temperature. So the clothes he was wearing, Kevin is missing. I guess his ID, his wallet are missing, and also his phone is still missing.
And also his glasses. His glasses were found in the parking lot by one of the a friend of the family's about, I think they said it was about 12 days later, 12 or 13 days later.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Of course, we talked about possibly him having an altercation outside, maybe after after getting kicked out, I guess technically the second time, once again, if we're to believe this. And his glasses were in the ground in the parking lot. Would this be the area, like behind the building, on the opposite side of the building as the front door?
Yeah, there's the brass rail has a back parking lot, and it's a very small parking lot. It probably can fit maybe, I think, 8 or 10 cars at the max. And the glasses were found, I think, near a back tire, or I'm not exactly sure, but they were found within a very close proximity of a car wheel. So, and the condition of the glasses, one of the lenses was popped out, and I think one of the arms was missing, and the other arm was bent as to kind of indicate that it was driven over or stepped on or something. And Kevin likes expensive glasses. Burberry and was the name of this pair of eyeglasses. $350.
Wow.
For a pair of eyeglasses. He has like 3 pairs of them, so he's got like $1,000 in eyewear. So he's for him to lose those is quite a big deal. And he paid for this with his own money, from working and stuff, I guess. So, so
I guess to jump in here, I guess we shouldn't be surprised if they were found 10 or 12 days later that they were busted. I mean, if they're in a parking lot, the odds of them getting run over are fairly high. So they could have been broken on the night of his disappearance, or he could have just dropped them and they got broken by being run over in those past 10 days, right?
Yeah. Well, he has poor eyesight. He has to wear glasses all the time, although he's not able to see very well. So, and I think that if he wasn't wearing his glasses the time of the first Arby's footage, tripping over the little cement thing in the sidewalk, the hump. That's kind of tells me that it's possible that he didn't have his glasses on at 1:30. Also,
right.
Who knows?
Right.
Who knows when he had his glasses?
Okay. I guess what we're also saying is the video, not clear enough to be able to tell that. It's not high definition video. Of course, it's night. There's no way on those videos to tell whether he's wearing his glasses in one or both of the videos or not. Not possible.
Yeah. No, it's too far away, too fuzzy. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so we have these glasses. I guess they've been identified by his family, and it's been decided that they are his. Of course, the brand name, maybe the cost of them makes them unique. But it was 10 or 12 days, which I have to say I'm a little surprised by that. I'm surprised they weren't found earlier, but that's the way things went. And so let's move on to this. You told me, and I had this in my notes. Maybe I put too fine of a point on this, you might say. But one of the bouncers at this brass rail, did you tell me that was he a friend of Kevin's, or maybe this just a situation where they got to know each other well because Kevin went there so many times? Maybe let's talk a little bit about that. Did he know one of the bouncers at the brass rail maybe better than the rest of them?
No, not from what I gathered during our conversations on Messenger. It was more of just a familiar face,
Okay.
The brass rails had, several bouncers. It's not just. I don't believe it's just one that's been there for years. It's just. It depends on what night you go.
Okay.
What bar guy is going to be there. So.
Okay. Do you know if the police have tracked down any of the bouncers working that night to talk to them, to verify if it's true? Did they have a run-in with Kevin? Did he get kicked out 4 times? Did he run at them? Did he try any MMA moves on them? Anything to back up what this woman said when she called in to this show? Anything like that? Do you even know?
No, we've never, in our discussion, we've never talked about the police contacting any of the people that were there that night.
Okay.
Just the owner of the bar.
Okay. Maybe since we're on the topic of maybe the police, at least here for a few moments, what kind of relationship would you say that Kevin's family has with the police department that is responsible? I don't know how much investigating they're doing, but responsible for Kevin's disappearance. What kind of relationship would you say they have?
I know Kevin's dad is not very happy with one of the detectives that's been working on the case for the past couple of years. He has early on in the investigation, basically the police were not really able to, say that there was any foul play. They weren't really able to, pursue this as a foul play incident.
Sure.
It was more like, hey, if you find anything on your son, let us know. It was like, you guys are pretty much on your own, and I guess the family wanted to, run this by a judge, to see what. To see if there could be any charges or even pursue this in a court, and the police wouldn't even do that.
Nope.
They just
So
there's
just no way.
So the frustration started. It seems to be very quickly, and it's been reported. I think this was from the podcast that one of the family members. Through this frustration, was intoxicated and entered the brass rail.
Oh my.
Close proximity of time from the disappearance. I went in there and had kind of tossed around some threats and was escorted out.
Oh my. Yeah, that's no good. Okay, so relationship not the greatest. Unfound's listeners know that that is not uncommon. In fact, that's pretty standard. Being frustrated with an investigation, being frustrated with an investigator, being frustrated that they're not keeping in contact enough, being frustrated that it doesn't seem like they're doing anything. All very common things. Let's talk. Once again, we do not know what happened to Kevin. It may be foul play. It could be something else we don't know. But regarding that area, being that we know that Kevin is seen on the video twice, that doesn't mean he didn't, turn around a second time and go back to the brass rail. We really don't know where he was going, although it was away from the brass rail, and it seems in the general direction of where he lived, although it's, like you said, 4.5 miles to his house. What kind of neighborhood is that? Is there any other types of businesses that would have been open at that time of night, 2:30 to 3 in the morning? Had he walked through that area before? What do you know about that neighborhood? In fact, you told me you kind of know somebody who owns a business in that general area. What do you know about that area?
Yeah, we've gone over that downtown map, many times. The cell phone towers and everything. The only businesses that would be open is if he was heading in the direction of this street, which is kind of heading in the direction of his home. There's a place called Columbia Street West, which is another bar, and they, they're open till 3 a.m. and there's gonna be people hanging out till 3:30 or so. So they have that place. There is also a diner, a small diner that is kind of in the kind of like in the heart of downtown. That I don't know if that's open 24 hours. But if he was heading in the direction of that, it's quite a possibility that place might have been open. But definitely the Columbia Street West bar, they always draw a pretty big crowd on weekends. As far as other businesses, no, not really. It's that the general vicinity of the Arby's heading towards his parents' house is pretty barren. There's a couple of apartment buildings, a lot of office buildings, your typical downtown type buildings. So he would have been walking on some pretty barren streets, especially in that.
All right, so not a lot of businesses that would be open, not many what we would call private homes, maybe a couple apartment buildings, but more of like, it sounds to me more like a little bit of a business area than a residential area, right in that immediate vicinity of the brass rail, the Arby's, etc.
Yeah. I mean, if you saw somebody walking in that area at that time, that'd be about one of the only people you'd see, especially at 2:44 in the morning.
Okay. And the listeners should know I am going to be doing a YouTube video, a map video for this, so all of you can understand the locations. I will be pointing out the brass rail, this Arby's, some of these other places that Brett has just mentioned. And also, I will show you the location of where Kevin was living with his family at the time. Now, what they're going to see in that video, and once again, we have to bring this up, is there a river that Kevin has to cross to get home? That he would have had to have walk across the river, but walk across the bridge across the river to get home if that is where he was headed.
Yes, so Fort Wayne is known for something called the Three Rivers, and Three Rivers is there's three different rivers. I can't remember all three names, but one of them is the St. Mary's River, and all three of these connect right near, or basically in the downtown area of Fort Wayne. And he was, any direction that he would go, he would have had to cross a bridge to get to his parents' home. There's no way that he would have made it home unless he would have gotten a ride without crossing the river.
Being that you lived in Fort Wayne for a time, what can you say about this river? Do we know the condition of it at the time of his disappearance that night? Was it Was it high? Was it low? Had there just been a storm? Was there snow melting from a recent snowstorm? Do we know anything about this river? And what is your experience? What is your personal knowledge of this river when you lived there?
Well, I lived next to a river on Griswold Drive in Fort Wayne. Right around, I think it was around 2000. And they did, the last year or two that I was there, they had a big project where they put up a big flood wall. So the river does rise, and, the Midwest, they get a lot of rain.
Sure.
A lot of rain. It's, there's periods where it's very shallow, and there's periods where if they get a lot of rain, well, it's, if it rains for, a few days in a row, on and off, yeah, the river's going to rise. Enough to put up a flood wall, yeah, I would say that they definitely get their, good share of rain. Sure.
Okay, but all right, so you have experience with that. Let's just say, we don't know that this happened, but as the listeners know, we don't theorize on this program, but sometimes when private people come on the program, bloggers, the public who's taken interest in a disappearance like you have, is this the type of river that if Kevin went into it, that it could be lethal? Would it be deep enough? Of course, it's not the Mississippi River or the Amazon, but is this the type of river under certain conditions that could be lethal?
Yeah, I mean, that's another big mystery. We don't know. We have things like undertow that we have to worry about whenever there's a body of water like that. So, this is,
Okay.
we just don't know,
Okay. I'm just wondering, I mean, if it was only 1 foot deep at the time of Kevin's disappearance, that's one thing. If it was 10 feet deep, of course, that would be totally something different. I guess we just don't know.
Yeah, well, this is, I probably could have looked up that information.
That's fine.
This is a river that, if you're not careful, it can be just as deadly as any other river. There's nothing really particularly dangerous about this river. It's just, I guess it would depend on the level at that time and how much, pressure it's got to pull you down. So.
Okay. But he would have had to have crossed it. Once again, if we're to believe that for some reason he didn't want to go home with his mother, maybe he didn't even know that she pulled up, we don't know, and he was walking home, that he would have had to have gone over this river one way or the other. And the listeners know, about how, unfortunately, many, it seems mostly young men who've been at bars end up in rivers. This is, of course, started the whole smiley face killer theory. It's not one that I subscribe to, but we still talk about water, and anytime we have a disappearance, and if somebody is intoxicated, man or woman. Okay, let's move on to, please.
There is a water filtration plant within a close proximity of the downtown area where Kevin would have been en route going home. So if he did fall in the water, I don't know. I'm not an expert on criteria like this.
Me neither.
So I would assume that a water filtration plant probably sucks in water, and then it does something to the water, and then it pushes it back out. So we have a factor like that, and we have something that's in the water that's doing something to the water, and so that, I think that's another thing we need to take into consideration.
Okay.
This river will flow out of Indiana into Ohio, and there has been over the years, and it's a rare occasion where I think a couple of people have drowned in this river, and they were found right across the border in like Defiance, Ohio, or whatever one of those. Or I think it's. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, it's that river's got a little bit of a body count. I'll just say.
Okay, very good. Now, something that has popped up regarding Kevin's disappearance is something that happened a few years before this, where another man went to the brass rail. Now, he didn't go missing, and in fact, he was discovered later. He had been murdered. I think it was that he was found eventually alive, but he died later. But it was classified as an attack, and people can find his name. I'll just say it right here: Michael Wilcher, Wilcher. He had been at the brass rail a few years before that, and he ended up getting attacked. He died, but was some distance from the brass rail, but he had been at the brass rail that night. What do we know about the circumstances regarding Michael Wilcher's death, having also been at the brass rail?
Yeah, again, that, the criteria surrounding the night of events, leading up to that. The only thing that we really know is that Michael Wilcher had gone to the brass rail that night with a family relative or whatever. I think it was a cousin or something.
Okay.
And I believe they were kicked out, and the bouncer, I guess the two had words or something. They were kicked out. The cousin and Michael Wilcher were driving en route to their home, and for some reason, and this is kind of in the same path that Kevin would have been walking.
Okay.
In the same direction, crossing the river, and so if they were driving, they had actually crossed the river, and then about maybe 3 or 4 blocks away, they found Michael Wilcher either on somebody's lawn or on a corner, and he had severe head trauma.
Oh my.
And it's never been, they've never come up with an answer as to what happened, but he had died a few hours later in the hospital from his head trauma.
And so what we're saying is that murder is still unsolved. Nobody's ever been charged with his death.
No. And this, if I could add, this did happen less than a year before Kevin's disappearance.
Okay. All right. So these are the things regarding Kevin's disappearance. And once again, just to kind of go through this for the listeners, he had been to the brass rail before, seemingly no problems. It's a place that he went 4 or 5 times before this particular night. He gets there. For some reason, unlike the other times, he's not acting like himself. It sounds like he got kicked out once. He walked away, the Arby's video. He comes back again. He's in the women's bathroom. He gets kicked out again. Somehow, I guess he sneaked in or snuck in. And it was somewhere in there where he calls his sister to get picked up. Instead, his mother shows up. But at the same time she is showing up, he seems to be walking away. That's what the Arby's video shows. And maybe somewhere in there, he had an altercation with the bouncers, and maybe it did get violent, but it does seem that he was walking away that second time from the brass rail by himself. That is not to say that he once again did not backtrack again and go back to the brass rail and something could have happened. However, there's no proof of that. So his mother shows up, she's trying to reach him, trying to call him. He's not answering for whatever reason, and he is never seen again. And that disappearance, of course, is still unsolved at this time. We do also have to remember, on the other hand, at least in Unfound's world, it's a fairly new disappearance. Of course, it's not quite 3 years old yet. The average age of a disappearance on Unfound, about 18 years old. So we have all of that, and as I've told Brett, as soon as we started talking about Kevin's disappearance, this does really remind me of T.J. Murray's disappearance in Texas from some years ago. It's a much older disappearance, maybe almost, I think it was 2012, so that's 9 years. Very similar kind of disappearance where a good guy goes to a bar, acts out of character, slaps a woman, gets kicked out of the bar. Video shows him walking off by himself, but that's a disappearance that is still unsolved. There are rumors maybe someone who wanted to get revenge on him because of what he, slapping this woman. And just like in Kevin's, nobody would be surprised that has been out there as well. Did somebody track him down as he was walking home and wanted to get revenge for something he did in the brass rail? No facts to dispute that. No facts to support that. Now back to you, Brett. What has this experience been like for you for the last 2 years, coordinating with Kevin's family, getting to know them getting to know you? Of course, you had never done something like this before. Maybe and you are doing the type of thing that I urge the listeners to do, to get involved, reach out to families, not just to pump them for information, but try to help them and give them a different perspective. What has this experience been like for you? Maybe some things maybe you didn't expect getting involved in something like that. Maybe you can just talk about your experience for the last 2 years.
Well, we've worked, for many hours. We put, it's not just, like a once a week, once a month. Hey, how's it going? This is stuff that we talk about weekly. There's weeks where we might talk twice. There's weeks where we'll sit down with our phones and correspond with each other for 2 hours. It just depends on what how the conversation flows. Like one of the nights we had a conversation about his Kevin's best buddy, who is an MMA fighter, and just since I'm taking this more seriously, like I really want to be involved in this type of work in the future. I'm learning about asking the right questions, and I think when you ask the right questions, you get the right answers, or at least you hope to get the answers.
Yeah.
And so there's been times, and for this particular instance, I started asking questions about this guy, and then they would get on their phone and they would do some research on it while we're talking, and they would take a screenshot and show me, and then I would be like, okay, well, blah blah blah, let's expand on this. What was this? Who do you associate with? Just trying to get them to ask the right questions, go to the right people, because they're gonna they said, oh yeah, well, he knows this person and that person, and he used to date this person or that person. I'm like, okay, well, all right, well, check them out, and then I think they even said, well, yeah, my one of our family members, like a cousin or something, knows this person, I said, well, okay, well, go to a family member and say, can you talk to him, find out what he knows. It's trying the different channels, the different the different ways of going about doing this. It's not just talking to the family and then getting some theories together. It's a very slow process, and it depends on our mindsets. Are we open to asking the right questions? Are our minds blank enough where we've thrown out stuff that's happened during the day and we want to focus on this for the next half an hour, whatever? It's sporadic, it's slow moving. All of it is done with care. I would never, if I didn't care about this case or the family, I wouldn't still be doing it.
Sure.
This is you have to care about the people that you're involved in. You can't just pump them full of get them to say things and then say, oh, I've solved the case. I'm going to tell all my friends I saw. It's not like that. It's you have to humble yourself, and you have to do this because it helps to challenge you as a person. For me, it's like it helps me to talk to people on a better, more positive level. It just, for me, it's enriching. It's helping me to grow as a person, and I'm making new friends.
Yeah.
It's all the positive, and I'm not pointing at anybody. Early on, it's I was like, oh yeah, the breast real. Oh my gosh, people are terrible. But I was only getting their side. And so you're really one of the first, I would consider, quote unquote, professionals that has really taken this case on. So with that, we've introduced a new perspective, a fresh face into this. So it's been like a breath of fresh air to have you on board with this, because
thanks.
it's been me, definitely. It's just been me and the family. The four of us.
Yeah.
We've been really. It seems like we've been really the only people that have been trying to keep this moving. They're all very grateful that I'm still on board with this, and I'm gonna stick out, because I do care about Kevin. I didn't know him, but there's been several cases. Brandon Lawson, I really got involved in that one about a year and a half ago. I talked to his brother. They stonewalled me. They didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
But with Kevin's case, it's the connection of living in their area, to be able to tell them, hey, I understand. I know that those areas. I hope to be able to continue to do this work. And I've never asked for a dime. And I think when you do things that you enjoy and you don't expect money out of it, I think you're kind of on the right path. To who you want to become as a person. And so I don't do this for financial gain. I do this because I want to help people, and I just want to grow as a person. So,
you've mentioned this podcast that was done locally regarding Kevin's disappearance. My understanding, maybe there were 5 episodes. You were not the one that started this. My understanding is that it was some local media person who started it and did about 5 episodes. How would you say that podcast went? I know that you've listened to all the episodes. You've sent me the episodes, and I've listened to them. Of course, the podcast is not doing that anymore. What can you say about that podcast?
Well, at the time, that was really the only, outside of the news coverage, that was the only real information. That was the only real outlet that we had for anything that happened with this case. There was a lot of loose ends, that weren't tied up with that. There was a lot of he said, she said. Well, do you got names of these people that have said that? It's I remember hearing in the podcast, one of the a friend of the family said, well, if Kevin was hitting on these girls, who are these girls, and why aren't they coming forward? Well, how do you arrive at a statement like that? Who said to them that there was girls that he was hitting on? It's how do you even arrive to that?
Right.
It's just it's been put through the rumor mill, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Brett, because I know that's a very important part of what I do in preparing these interviews, is that it's not just enough to have information. It's, you have to know where the information came from. And I think that's what you're saying there. Well, he was hitting on women that night. Well, who said that? I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just saying, who said that? How do we know that? Who was keeping an eye on him? If there were women there who said that, I'm not saying we need to know their names, but it just needs a little more context than, oh yeah, well, we heard he was trying to meet women that night and he was acting obnoxiously. Well, what is the definition of obnoxious? I don't know. So, it's an important part of what I do.
And none of these people that supposedly were there that night, I mean, none of them have cracked. It's like if they all are in cahoots with each other and they're, going somewhere and they're sitting in a room and they're saying, you didn't say anything, oh, no, I didn't say anything. It doesn't appear that is the case. It's just whenever we ask a question, there was somebody that I had contacted through Facebook Messenger that kind of said that, yeah, he was there that night. He's a fellow comedian, and he said that he had went to a party after leaving the brass rail. And every time I asked him a question, it was, the Stonewall. It's like, no, everything was just no, and it's every time that it seems like we try to push forward with going the route of the brass rail being nefarious, in some way, we're met with just, no, denial, complete denial, and there's never anything added onto it. It's just, it's total denial. And you would think if there's, 50, 75 people there, it's not a very big place. It's, it's pretty much a hole in the wall. I think capacity might be, 125, 150 or whatever.
But getting back to this podcast, anything substantial come from it?
From the picture or from the videos?
No, from just the podcast itself. All these episodes. Did it anything come from it? Any new breaks? Of course, we know it's still unsolved, but did it move Kevin's case forward?
No, not really. Hasn't really done anything. Supposedly somebody called into the radio station and had threatened the people working at the radio station to stop the podcast, and there was no explanation as to why. The next following episode that was supposed to air was somebody that was actually there the night of Kevin's disappearance, and that was never done because of that threat.
Okay. Any surprises to you, just in disappearances in general? You working on this 2 years, things that maybe you thought you knew about disappearances that then maybe working on this for 2 years, your mind has been changed?
Well, I guess if I were to say if, Unfound would be kind of the source for a break in the case, would be kind of, the little bit of a change, I guess. We've, like I said, you're one of the first people that's actually come back and said, hey, let's talk about this. We've talked to a couple of other sources, online sources, that do podcasts, and one of them was a TV show, and they do paranormal stuff, and then on the side they do missing persons cases. And I had started talking with them, and they seemed like they were really, really interested there for a bit, and then I started giving them, a list of people that we thought were at the brass rail that night that might have been responsible or that know something, and they just kind of ghosted us. So so we've hit a lot of dead walls.
Okay. Is there any recommendations you might have? Anybody else out there that you could speak to who might be thinking about doing what you're doing? Of course, maybe a disappearance in an area that they know. Any recommendations to them, being that you've been working on this for 2 years? Any recommendations that you would make to them if they're thinking about doing what you've been doing for the last 2 years?
definitely don't just go with one source. Don't just listen to one podcast. You really got to do your homework on this. You've got to do you've got to study the environment. You've got to go to multiple sources. I wouldn't recommend making phone calls, bothering businesses. I mean, you can, but if it's something that happened 5 years ago, and you're calling them, asking them for surveillance footage, or if an employee is still working there that might know, you can really throw a lot of wasted, energy and time into these. The best way to go about it is to really, before you even really contact a family, make sure that you feel confident about what you're doing and not just blind confidence. Really know what you're talking about. That was my mistake when I first started, was that I felt like I was a good storyteller to myself, and I would just go on these wild tangents. That's not going to help the credibility of what you're saying. You have to put the time in, and if you feel like you have something that's worth sharing, yeah, definitely do it, but never go off the spur of the moment. Always think about what you're going to say, because this is someone's family. And a lot of times these family members, they're constantly, or maybe not constantly, but quite often they're bombarded with people that have these wild little tangent things that they go off of, and some of them are just sick of hearing it. It's like, just alone. We want peace in our life. We've already accepted the fact that they're gone. Just leave us in peace. It's kind of like harassing people. If you don't, if your heart's not into it, and if you just want to spout off to somebody like, oh yeah, it's probably this, just keep it to yourself, or tell your coworkers about it, or your family member, but don't go running to the family, for the slightest little thing. There was a case that I worked on during COVID, and the Donita Wilkerson case, and of course brain scratch, and I forgot what other source, but I got into that case, and I learned through our group Messenger that police rap sheets, police reports, if you type in a person's name in that local area where they live, and if you can find a police report on that person, if it's mentioned in the podcast that person has had a run-in with somebody and they were hauled into jail or whatever and spent the night in jail, you can find that information, and you might even be able to find the name of the person that they had the altercation with. So I spent about 8 hours that night working on this, and by about 5 or 6 in the morning, I had actually tracked down 2 separate occasions where this guy had a physical altercation with Donita, and he was one of the last people, I believe, that was seen with her. So of course I called into the local police. I called my mom first, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I found this, it's, should I just say, I call the police and say I found it? And, Mom said, well, I guess it wouldn't hurt, and so I did. The police were very nice about it, and they said, yeah, we already knew, but we do appreciate it. And if you find out anything else, let us know. But it's, this line of work is very, you can't put in 8 hours and expect to get a reward out of it, or to feel rewarded by it. It's just, it's slow moving. You can go 6 months and not really find out anything, and then all of a sudden one little thing will happen. You'll ask the right question to the right person, and you've opened up a whole new area, a whole new realm of possibilities to go down.
Is there a Facebook page, website set up for Kevin Nguyen's disappearance?
Yes, there is a missing Kevin Nguyen page on Facebook.
Okay.
I think it's bring Kevin Nguyen home or something like that. All you got to do is type in missing or Kevin Nguyen missing on Facebook. It's
Okay.
yeah. I believe there's two Facebook pages. So
Okay.
yeah.
Brett, any final words before we complete this interview?
Well, I'd like to thank you first of all, Ed. You've been an amazing influence on me so far with your work. Very, very grateful. I am very grateful to Kevin's dad, Lance, Miss D, Kevin's mother, and I don't want to mention her name, but our other friend in the group. They've all been amazing people. I really am grateful that we've been able to put this time in to work together. Even you, Ed, I hope that something good comes out of this. This family needs peace. There's been a lot of hard feelings, floating around town with, the family and the brass rail, and
Yeah.
the local artist community. It's this family needs healing. And until that break in this case happens, that's what I'm pushing for, is for the family to get the right type of healing that they need, to just be there, listen to them, be supportive. And if we find something out, if it leads us down a path, or there's someone at the brass rail that knows something, I'm totally on board with it. But as of right now, I think we've come to the conclusion that, we don't really have anything yet. So, but we'll definitely keep our eyes peeled. We'll definitely keep our noses to the, how do they say it? Nose to the grindstone.
That's right. That is the saying. And listeners should know that you are appearing on Unfound with the permission of Kevin's family. They knew that you were going to be doing this interview and gave you their blessing to do this interview with me. Correct?
Yes, I did get permission from them.
Okay.
I got permission from them earlier this week, or I think it was over the weekend. So they've known about this for the past about 4 or 5 days.
Okay, great. Well, Brett, it's been good to get to know you the last few weeks. I deeply appreciate you getting involved in a disappearance. Listeners know that I wish more people would do what you are doing, and I hope you will keep me informed as to your progress with Kevin's family, and if there's, of course, anything that I can do to help, you need any opinions, any insights, anything like that, that's why I'm here. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And that was my September 16th, 2021 interview with Brett, friend of the Nguyen family and part-time sleuth. I thank him for representing Kevin's family and joining me and all of you on this episode. I have also sent emails to members of Kevin's family to let them know I'm always available to talk, for analysis, or whatever else they may need. As I stated during the interview, I have produced a map analysis video for Kevin's disappearance. It is now available on the Unfound Podcast Channel on YouTube. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. So then, why do people walk off after calling for a ride? Because no matter if you are inclined to believe Kevin disappeared all on his own, or was the victim of foul play, there is no denying that he called for that ride, then walked off right around the time that ride showed up. That is what the timeline says. Well, to reference the cases mentioned at the beginning of this episode, Crystal Morrison called from her job, then disappeared. Her remains were found in 2019 about a mile away. The coroner decided that there was no foul play. She is presumed to have died from a combination of sickness, frailty, and 100-degree weather. Essentially, heat stroke. Deborah Bowman called from a hospital, then disappeared. Her case is still unsolved, but she was a woman who had problems, both physical and mental. And Deborah had a drug addiction. Yet, I think a popular theory is that she was murdered. Shane Fell called from his wrecked car, then disappeared. Also unsolved. Given that he was right beside the Mississippi River, there is the belief that for some reason he went into it, maybe due to a head injury sustained during the crash, although there is no proof of that. For me, I see Kevin's disappearance in each of those. We have a weather element, like crystals. We have a possible mental event going on with a foul play possibility, like Deborah's. We have a possible head injury issue like Shane's. It could have come during an alleged fight Kevin had with the bouncers. What I'm saying is there are a variety of rational theories, although which one is best will depend on your perceptions you derive from this episode. Nobody is right, nobody is wrong. If we knew what happened, we could just go solve it right now. However, and this is where the other reference to the title of this episode comes in, besides the one in which I've used examples of missing people calling someone to pick them up, then not being there. The fact is, people love to exaggerate. They love to gossip. They love to tell people they were there for something important or unique when really they weren't. It's the very reason that I dismiss so many eyewitness accounts after the accepted day of a disappearance, because 999 out of 1,000 times the people are lying. Or to be very generous, they saw something that wasn't true. In fact, professional investigators know that of all possible types of evidence, eyewitness accounts are the least reliable. On that note, although I don't think we stressed it enough in the interview, Fort Wayne police looked at video from inside the brass rail and saw nothing of a criminal or violent nature. What about the outside cameras? Good question. Ownership says those cameras don't work. I know what you're thinking. How convenient. And if you want to be suspicious of it, you can. But we have featured many disappearances on this program where cameras didn't work. In fact, they never worked. Why? Because their owners discover that cameras just being there is enough to stop suspicious activity, even if there is no electricity going to them. Very common. But Unfound covered the disappearance of TJ Murray at the beginning of this year. A disappearance very much like Kevin's. But in TJ's, the cameras outside the bar were working. Yet there are still a bunch of rumors that people tracked him down and took out revenge on him for slapping that woman. Certainly possible. Certainly possible. But none of us should believe it just because a bunch of people say it. Just because it might make sense. And for Kevin's, just because one woman who won't use her real name called into a radio show. We need more facts and less talk. We should be very careful not to get caught up in the telephone game. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.